I was living with a stutter since I was 5 years old. Through years of speech therapy and determination, I had improved, but words still caught in my throat at times. When I met Natalie, she told me my stutter was part of what made me unique. She seemed patient, understanding, and kind whenever I struggled to get sentences out. We got married last spring, and this Christmas would be my first with her family. I was nervous but hopeful that this holiday dinner would be the beginning of many warm family traditions together. I had no idea it would instead reveal the true nature of the woman I had married. Let me know where you are watching from today and hit that like and subscribe button if you want to hear how I finally stood up for myself after the most humiliating moment of my life. My name is Quinn, and I work as a software engineer at a tech firm in Boston. Despite my professional success, I always felt self-conscious about my stutter, especially in social situations or when meeting new people. I practiced constantly, but certain sounds would still trip me up, particularly under stress. When I had to introduce myself at meetings, my heart would race, and that only made the stutter worse. I met Natalie at a company mixer 3 years ago. She worked in marketing for a firm that partnered with ours. When I introduced myself, I got stuck on my own name. Instead of looking away awkwardly like most people do, Natalie waited patiently, maintaining eye contact and smiling. After I finished, she said, "Nice to meet you, Quinn. I like your patience." Most people rush through conversations without thinking. That simple acknowledgement meant everything to me. We started dating, and I fell hard for her confidence, her energy, and what I thought was her compassion. She was beautiful with dark hair and a smile that lit up rooms. She was ambitious and came from what she called old money in Massachusetts. During our courtship, she seemed completely unbothered by my speech impediment, often telling me she found it endearing. We got married after dating for a year. The ceremony was small, mostly my family, since her parents were traveling in Europe and could not possibly reschedule. I was disappointed but understood. Natalie assured me there would be plenty of time to bond with her family in the future. I truly believed I had found someone who accepted me exactly as I was. The first signs that something was off appeared gradually. 6 months into our marriage, we attended a dinner party with her college friends. When I tried to tell a story about a camping trip, I struggled with several words. Natalie jumped in, finishing my sentences with increasing frequency throughout the evening. On the ride home, she said, "Maybe you should see your speech therapist again. It was really bad tonight." Her comment stung, but I told myself she was just looking out for me. I did schedule additional speech therapy sessions, working twice as hard to improve. I wanted to make her proud when we were out together. Soon, Natalie started showing impatience when we were alone too. If I struggled during a conversation, she would sigh dramatically or check her phone until I finished speaking. Sometimes she would mutter Jesus under her breath when I got stuck on a word. When I confronted her about it, she claimed I was being too sensitive. "I deal with your stutter every day, Quinn," she said. "You can handle a little frustration from me now and then." The pattern continued, with small digs becoming more frequent. She would sometimes imitate my stutter when retelling stories to friends, always laughing it off as a joke if I seemed upset. I started speaking less around her, afraid of giving her more material to mock. Despite these warning signs, I was excited when Natalie suggested spending Christmas with her family. Finally, meeting her parents felt like a step towards strengthening our marriage. They lived in an affluent suburb outside Boston in a house Natalie described as modest by their standards, though from her stories I pictured something resembling a small mansion. "Just be yourself," Natalie said as we prepared for the trip. "They will love you because I love you." I spent weeks preparing for this dinner. I bought expensive gifts for everyone: a rare scotch for her father Richard, a designer scarf for her mother, Diana books for her sister Sophie, and golf accessories for her brother James and his wife Tara. I rehearsed potential conversation topics in front of the mirror, practicing words that typically gave me trouble. I wanted desperately to make a good impression. The night before our trip, I barely slept. Natalie seemed distant, spending most of the evening texting with her sister about last-minute details. I tried to ignore the knot forming in my stomach, telling myself everything would be fine. These people were my family now. Surely they would accept me, stutter and all. Natalie's family home was exactly what I had imagined: a sprawling colonial-style house with perfectly manicured grounds, even in December. The driveway curved elegantly toward the front door, passing a fountain that had been covered for winter. As we pulled up, I took deep breaths, reminding myself of all the exercises my speech therapist had taught me. "Ready?" Natalie asked, looking more tense than I had ever seen her. As I will ever be, I replied, already feeling my stutter intensify from nervousness. Natalie frowned slightly but quickly replaced it with a smile as the front door opened. Her mother Diana emerged elegant in a cashmere sweater and pearls. She embraced Natalie warmly, then turned to me with a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "You must be Quinn," she said, offering a hand instead of a hug. "We have heard so much about you." Something about her tone suggested what she had heard was not entirely positive. Inside the house was decorated like something from a magazine. A 12-foot Christmas tree dominated the foyer, adorned with what looked like antique ornaments. Garlands draped every banister and mantel, and the air smelled of cinnamon and pine. "They are in the living room," Diana said, leading us through the house. "Richard has been looking forward to meeting you." Richard Lawson was a tall man with silver hair, and the confident posture of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. He was drinking scotch by the fireplace, deep in conversation with a younger man I assumed was James, Natalie's brother. A petite, blonde woman beside him would be Tara, his wife. On the other side of the room sat a younger woman who looked strikingly like Natalie Sophie. "The newlyweds have arrived," Diana announced. Richard turned his eyes immediately, assessing me. "So this is the programmer," he said. "Software engineer." Actually, I corrected immediately, wishing I hadn't, when I saw his eyebrow rise at my stutter. "Quinn," I said, extending my hand, "pleased to meet you, sir." He took my hand with a firm grip. "Well, Quinn, welcome to our home. Let us see if you can keep up with the Lawsons." The comment was made with a smile, but the challenge in it was unmistakable. I noticed Natalie shift closer to her father, physically distancing herself from me. It was subtle, but it sent a clear message about where her allegiances lay when we were with her family. Introductions continued with James and his wife Tara, both of whom worked in finance and spoke in the shorthand of people who share not just a profession but a worldview. Sophie, the youngest at 24, was getting her MBA and seemed the most genuine of the bunch, actually asking questions about my work. "So you design security systems?" she asked after I mentioned my current project. "That sounds fascinating. Is it like creating a digital fortress?" Before I could answer, Richard interjected. "I doubt it is that dramatic, Sophie. More like making sure people use proper passwords, right, Quinn? Actually, it is quite complex." I began, but Richard had already turned away, engaging James in a conversation about stock projections for the next quarter. Natalie had disappeared with her mother to check on dinner, leaving me alone with her family. The subtle dismissal of my work stung, but I reminded myself that first meetings could be awkward. I focused on Sophie, who seemed genuinely interested, though I noticed her eyes occasionally flick to my mouth when I struggled with words. When Natalie returned, she seemed to have transformed into someone I barely recognized. Gone was the woman who had patiently waited for me to finish my sentences when we first met. In her place was someone who laughed too loudly at her father's jokes and kept touching his arm as if seeking approval. Dinner was announced and we moved to a formal dining room with a table that could easily seat 14. The placement felt strategic, Richard at the head with Natalie and James on either side, then Diana at the opposite end. I was seated between Sophie and Tara, as far from Richard as possible without being completely banished. The meal began with Richard saying a brief grace, followed immediately by questions directed at everyone except me. James talked about a recent acquisition his firm had handled. Tara discussed a charity gala she was organizing. Diana mentioned renovations to their vacation home in Nantucket. When Sophie tried to include me by asking about Boston's tech scene, Natalie quickly redirected the conversation to mutual friends from their childhood. I stayed quiet, focusing on my food and nodding at appropriate intervals. The wine flowed freely, with Richard insisting on refilling glasses. I noticed Natalie drinking more than usual, becoming louder and more animated with each glass. During the main course, Richard finally addressed me directly. "So Quinn, Natalie tells us you grew up in Michigan. Must be quite different from what she is accustomed to." It was a loaded question, implying my background was somehow inferior. I took a deep breath before responding. It was a wonderful place to grow up. My parents were both teachers, and we lived in a close-knit community near Ann Arbor. Teachers, Richard repeated as if the word tasted strange. Honorable profession, though not particularly ambitious. My father was department chair at the university. I added, feeling a need to defend my family. "What university might that be?" Richard asked, though I suspected he knew the answer. "Michigan State." "Ah," he said, exchanging a glance with his wife. Not quite Harvard, is it? James snickered, and I saw Natalie smile along, though her eyes darted nervously between her father and me. This was the moment I should have recognized what was happening, but I was still trying to be the bigger person to win their approval for Natalie's sake. I decided to change the subject by mentioning a project I was particularly proud of, a security system my team had developed for a major financial institution. We implemented a multi-layered authentication system that reduced breaches by 98% in the first quarter. After installation, I explained my stutter intensifying under the pressure of having everyone's attention. I could see Richard's impatience growing with each stuttered word. James started checking his watch. Only Sophie maintained eye contact, nodding encouragingly. The client was so impressed that they recommended us to several other B-banks, and now we are. "Is this going to take all night?" Richard interrupted. "Some of us would like to finish dinner before breakfast." The table went quiet. Diana looked down at her plate. James smirked. "I am sorry," I said, feeling my face grow hot. "Sometimes I get excited about my work, and..." That was when it happened. Natalie, the woman who had claimed to love me for who I was, the woman who had promised to stand by me through anything, suddenly began to imitate my stutter. Sometimes I get excited. She mimicked, exaggerating the stutter to a grotesque degree, her face contorting in an ugly parody of struggle. Stunned silence followed quickly, replaced by laughter from her father. James joined in, then Tara. Then Diana, though more reservedly. Even Sophie, who had seemed kind, covered her mouth but could not hide the amusement in her eyes. I sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. The woman I loved was mocking the speech impediment I had battled my entire life, the source of so much childhood trauma and adult insecurity. And she was doing it for the entertainment of her family, for their approval. Natalie, emboldened by the laughter, continued her performance. Look at him struggling like a broken machine." Her voice was cruel, unrecognizable. "Maybe if we turn him off and on again, he will learn to speak like a normal person." Richard roared with laughter and extended his hand across the table. Natalie high-fived him, beaming with pride at his approval. In that moment, I saw everything clearly. I was not her husband. I was a prop in her performance for her family, a punchline to prove she was still one of them despite marrying down. I tried to smile through it, to pretend it did not cut me to my core. What else could I do? Make a scene, storm out? This was Christmas dinner with my in-laws. I was supposed to be creating bonds, not breaking them. So I forced my lips into what must have been a grimace and looked down at my plate. "I will clear the dishes," I said, quietly standing and beginning to gather plates. "Oh, look at that," Richard said. "At least he is useful for something." More laughter followed me as I carried stacks of dishes to the kitchen. With each trip, I heard snippets of their continued mockery. They had moved on from my stutter to my job, my clothes, even speculating about why Natalie had married me at all. "He must be very good with his hands," James suggested to howls of laughter. "Or his wallet," Richard added, though I doubt it from the looks of his watch. In the kitchen, I stood alone, listening to their laughter through the door. The beautiful home, the perfect Christmas decorations, the expensive food and wine, all of it felt hollow now. This family was rotten at its core, and my wife, my Natalie, was right there with them, feeding on cruelty. I made a decision then that would change the course of my life. I would not stay another minute in that house. I would not give them the satisfaction of further humiliating me. Quietly, I took out my phone and called a taxi. While waiting, I washed my hands, dried them carefully, and straightened my shirt. I would leave with my dignity intact, what little remained of it. The taxi arrived 15 minutes later. Without returning to the dining room, I slipped out the front door, leaving behind all the carefully chosen gifts I had brought. Let them wonder where I had gone. Let Natalie explain my absence. As the taxi pulled away, my phone began buzzing with texts and calls from Natalie. I silenced it, watching the grand house recede in the distance. Snow had begun to fall lightly, covering the immaculate lawn with a thin white blanket that seemed to purify everything it touched. "Change of plans?" the driver asked, noting my formal attire and lack of luggage. You could say that I replied, surprised by how smoothly the words came out. Anger, it seemed, temporarily overrode my stutter. I checked into a hotel near the train station and booked a ticket back to Boston for the morning. That night alone in the sterile hotel room with its generic Christmas decorations, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. I cried not quietly, but with heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep and wounded. I cried for the relationship I thought I had, for the person I thought Natalie was, and for the way I had allowed myself to be treated, not just tonight, but for months. By morning, sadness had hardened into resolve. Natalie had called 27 times and left 14 voicemails progressively angrier in tone. I listened to enough to know she was not calling to apologize, but to berate me for embarrassing her by leaving. Not once did she acknowledge what she had done. I took the early train back to Boston, watching the winter landscape scroll by and contemplating what waited for me at home. Our apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt contaminated by deception. How many times had Natalie mocked me behind my back? How often had she complained about my stutter to friends, family, maybe even strangers? When I arrived at our apartment, Natalie was already there, having driven back early that morning. She looked terrible with red-rimmed eyes and yesterday's clothes still on. The moment I walked in, she exploded. "How dare you?" she screamed. "How dare you walk out on my family on Christmas? Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for me?" I set down my bag calmly. "No, Natalie, how dare you?" She rolled her eyes at my stutter, which only strengthened my resolve. "You mocked me." I continued, forcing the words out despite the block I felt forming. "In front of your family, you turned the thing I am most sensitive about into a joke." "It was just teasing Quinn," she said, her voice softening into something manipulative. "Families tease each other. You took it way too seriously." "That was not teasing. That was cruelty." "Oh, stop being so sensitive," she snapped, the false sweetness evaporating. "My family was trying to include you in the fun. If you cannot take a joke, that is your problem." "A joke," I echoed. "Making fun of something, I cannot control something I have worked on my entire life. That is your idea of a joke." Natalie threw up her hand. "What do you want from me, Quinn? An apology? Fine. I am sorry you cannot take a joke. I am sorry you embarrassed me by running away like a child. I am sorry I married someone so insecure he cannot handle a little family ribbing." In that moment, looking at her beautiful, angry face, I realized I did not know this woman at all. The Natalie I fell in love with had been a carefully constructed facade designed to catch a husband who would worship her. Now that mask had slipped, revealing someone cold and capable of extraordinary cruelty. "I need some time away from you," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I am going to stay somewhere else for a while." "What?" she exclaimed, clearly not expecting this. "Do not be ridiculous. Where would you even go?" "That is not your concern anymore," I replied, moving toward the bedroom to pack a bag. She followed her tactics, shifting rapidly from anger to pleading. "Quinn, baby," I said, "I was sorry. It was a mistake. We had all been drinking. You know how my father gets, and I just wanted him to like you." By humiliating me, I asked, pulling clothes from drawers and placing them in a suitcase. It was not like that she insisted, placing her hand on mine to stop my packing. "Please let us talk about this. Do not throw away our marriage over one bad night." I looked at her, then really looked, trying to see if there was anything left of the woman I thought I had married. All I saw was panic at losing control of the situation, not genuine remorse. "It was not just one night," I said quietly. "It was every time you sighed when I stuttered. Every time you interrupted me instead of waiting for me to finish. Every time you looked embarrassed when I spoke in public. Last night just showed me who you really are, who you have always been." The truth of my words seemed to hit her, and her expression hardened. "Fine," she spat. "Go. Run away. But do not expect me to be waiting when you come crawling back." I finished packing in silence, gathered some essential documents and my laptop, and headed for the door. As I was leaving, Natalie called after me. "Where am I supposed to tell people you are?" she demanded, still focused on appearances. "Tell them the truth," I suggested. "That you mocked your husband until he left." The door closed on her protests, and I walked away from the life we had built together, uncertain of where I was going, but absolutely certain I was doing the right thing. I ended up renting a small studio apartment across town using savings I had been setting aside for our future together. It was nothing special, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom, so small you could brush your teeth while sitting on the toilet. But it was mine, free from Natalie's judgment and her family's cruelty. The first few weeks were a blur of practical matters, changing addresses, opening a separate bank account, establishing a new routine. Natalie alternated between angry texts, demanding I return, and tearful voicemails claiming she could not live without me. I responded only to logistical questions about bills and our shared possessions. In my new solitude, I began to focus on healing. I found a new speech therapist, Dr. Marlene Jensen, who specialized in adults with long-term stuttering issues. Unlike previous therapists who had focused solely on techniques to minimize the stutter, Dr. Jensen took a holistic approach. The stutter is physical, yes, she explained during our first session, but it is exacerbated by emotional factors, particularly shame and anxiety. We need to address both. We worked not just on breathing and pacing techniques, but on confronting the deep-seated shame I felt about my speech. She helped me see how my relationship with Natalie had reinforced that shame rather than healing it. What she did was verbal abuse, Dr. Jensen said plainly. And it sounds like it had been happening in subtle ways throughout your relationship. Hearing someone name Natalie's behavior as abuse was validating. I had been doubting myself, wondering if I had overreacted at the Christmas dinner. Now, a professional was confirming what my gut had been telling me. I deserved better treatment. Through Dr. Jensen, I joined a support group for adults with speech disorders. There I met Michael, a successful trial attorney who had overcome a severe stutter. He had developed a philosophy that changed my perspective. I do not try to not stutter, he told me after a meeting. I try to stutter well and confidently. The goal is not perfect speech, but authentic communication. Michael introduced me to techniques I had never tried before, focusing on owning my stutter rather than fighting it. We practiced voluntary stuttering, deliberately prolonging sounds to reduce the fear of getting stuck on them. We worked on maintaining eye contact during blocks rather than looking away in shame. Meanwhile, Natalie's attempts to contact me grew more desperate. 2 months after I left, she showed up at my workplace, causing a scene in the lobby until security escorted her out. She found out where I was living, likely through a mutual friend, and began leaving notes under my door, alternating between apologies and accusations. Her sister Sophie reached out as well, initially to berate me for hurting Natalie, but eventually to try a more diplomatic approach. She really is sorry, Quinn, Sophie said during a brief phone call. Our family went too far that night. We all feel terrible about it. Does Richard feel terrible too? I asked, noticing how smoothly the question came out. Her silence was answer enough. As months passed, I found myself thriving in unexpected ways. Without Natalie's subtle undermining, my confidence at work grew. I spoke up more in meetings, and though I still stuttered, I no longer apologized for it. My team responded positively to my more assertive leadership, and in April, I was promoted to senior project manager. I also discovered a passion for helping others with speech disorders. Inspired by Michael, I began volunteering with a program that worked with teenagers who stuttered, sharing techniques, and more importantly, showing them that stuttering did not have to limit their futures. Through all of this, my speech gradually improved. Not because I was cured, chronic stuttering is rarely completely eliminated, but because I carried less tension and fear. When I stuttered now, it was gentler, less traumatic, just a small ripple in the flow of conversation rather than a wall I crashed against. Natalie was not doing as well, according to mutual friends. She had been passed over for a promotion she had been certain was hers. Rumors circulated that her drinking had increased, affecting her work performance. I felt no pleasure in her struggles, only a distant sadness for what might have been, had she been the person I thought she was. Then came the day, exactly 6 months after that fateful Christmas dinner, when everything came to a head. I was at home on a Saturday afternoon, reading by the window of my small apartment, when I heard shouting from the street below. Looking down, I saw Natalie standing on the sidewalk, looking up at my window. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared her expression wild. "Quinn," she screamed, "I know you are in there. Come down and talk to me." I pulled back from the window, heart pounding. Moments later, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "Please answer her. She has been drinking and would not let me drive her home. I am worried what she might do." As I stood there debating what to do, Natalie's shouts grew louder, drawing attention from neighbors. She was making a spectacle of herself, and part of me, the part that still cared for the woman I thought I had married, did not want to see her humiliated. I went downstairs and stepped outside. Natalie immediately rushed toward me, stopping short when I held up a hand. "You came," she said, swaying slightly. "I knew you would still care." "What do you want, Natalie?" I asked, noticing with surprise that I was speaking perfectly clearly without a hint of a stutter. The heightened emotion should have triggered blocks, but instead I felt strangely calm and in control. "I want you back," she said, her voice breaking. "I miss you. I am sorry, so sorry for what happened. I will never do anything like that again." She looked genuinely remorseful, tears streaming down her face. 6 months ago, this display would have weakened my resolve. Now I saw it clearly for what it was: manipulation from a woman who hated losing control. "It is too late," I said, still speaking with perfect clarity. "I have filed for divorce. You should have received the papers yesterday." Her face contorted with anger. "You cannot do this to me. Do you know what people are saying? That I drove you away, that my family is toxic. My father is furious." And there it was, her real concern. Not losing me, but losing face with her father and their social circle. "That sounds like a personal problem," I replied calmly. "Perhaps you can all make jokes about it over your next Christmas dinner." Sophie appeared, then having parked their car. "Natalie, please. This is not helping anything. Tell him," Natalie demanded of her sister. "Tell him how sorry we all are." Sophie looked at me apologetically. "We really are sorry, Quinn. What we did was cruel. Thank you for acknowledging that," I said, nodding at Sophie. "But an apology 6 months later, only after your family has faced social consequences, does not change anything." "What happened to you?" Natalie asked, suddenly noticing my fluent speech. "You are not even stuttering anymore." "I am still stuttering sometimes," I corrected her. "But I am no longer ashamed of it, and I am no longer around people who make me anxious about it." It turns out removing toxic influences does wonders for speech therapy. The implication was not lost on her. She lunged forward, trying to slap me, but Sophie caught her arm. "That is enough," Sophie said firmly. "We are leaving. Now." As Sophie guided her sister back to their car, Natalie turned to shout one last thing. "You will regret this, Quinn. You will never find anyone else who puts up with your broken speech." I watched them drive away, feeling nothing but relief. Natalie's final insult confirmed what I had known for months. I had made the right decision in leaving. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Natalie contested nothing, apparently eager to be done with the marriage as I was. Through mutual friends, I heard that Richard's investment firm was under investigation for irregularities, and the family was facing financial difficulties for the first time. I took no pleasure in this news, but recognized the irony. The family that had judged me for not being good enough was now facing their own fall from grace. Meanwhile, I continued to thrive. My promotion came with a substantial raise, allowing me to move to a better apartment. I kept volunteering with teenagers who stuttered, finding purpose in helping them navigate the challenges I had faced. Through the support group, I met Rachel, a speech-language pathologist who had overcome a childhood stutter herself. We started as friends, but gradually a deeper connection formed. Unlike Natalie, Rachel understood the struggle intimately and never showed a moment's impatience when I blocked on words. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and genuine understanding rather than superficial attraction. By the time the next Christmas approached, I had healed enough to host a dinner of my own, inviting my parents, my sister, and a few close friends, including Rachel. As we sat around my table sharing food and stories, and genuine laughter, I realized how different this was from the Christmas a year before. Here, no one finished my sentences unless invited to. No one grew impatient when I took extra time to express a thought. No one used my stutter as ammunition for cheap laughs. Instead, there was warmth, respect, and the kind of love that builds up rather than tears down. When I stuttered while proposing a toast, Rachel squeezed my hand supportively, and everyone waited patiently for me to finish. The contrast to Natalie's mockery could not have been more stark. Later, as Rachel helped me clean up, she asked, "Do you ever think about reaching out to Natalie?" For closure, I considered the question carefully. "I already have closure," I said. The moment I walked away from someone who would rather please her cruel family than protect her husband's dignity. I closed that chapter completely. Rachel nodded understanding. "You speak so differently now, not just the stutter but with confidence." "I found my voice," I said simply. "Not just in how I talk, but in how I choose to live with dignity." Looking back, I can see that the humiliation of that Christmas dinner was actually the beginning of my freedom. By showing me exactly who she was, Natalie released me from a marriage that was slowly eroding my self-worth. Her cruelty forced me to make a choice: continue accepting mistreatment or stand up for myself. In choosing the latter, I discovered strength I never knew I had. I learned that a speech impediment does not define my value or limit what I can achieve. Most importantly, I learned to surround myself with people who see me, not my stutter. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they showed you who they truly were? Drop a comment below and share your experience. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more personal journeys of overcoming betrayal and finding strength. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is goodbye to those who do not value your voice. Thank you for listening, and I hope you find the courage to speak your truth whether your words flow smoothly or not.